Hi there, Will here, and I've owned this Olympus Mju 2 for 4.5 years now, and I figured now would be a good time to give a fair, unbiased review of it. I'll start this off the same way I have my other long-term camera reviews, which is to say that I've owned the camera for 4 years, and in those 4 years it has received 0 repairs. That is not to say that it has not needed them, but I'll get to that later. This is actually the second Mju that I've owned, because I had to sell my first one out of necessity, but the issues that I have with this one, and had with the previous one, are somehow mirrored, so it's a good comparison. In terms of things that need repair, but can't be repaired, the seals in the Mju are made of rubber. This is what allows them to be weatherproof, in theory. But rubber also perishes, and as it perishes it starts to leak light, and probably water, not that I've had that with mine. The rubber seals perish and they leak light, and they can't be replaced because they're very specifically sized and they form a very specific seal on the camera. It also has rubber seals on the lens, which is a big problem because the lens seals then perish and you get light leaks through the front of your camera, which are impossible to fix. I've seen some posts on forums where people say that they sort of haphazardly tape around it and that it has impacted the severity of their light leaks, but overall, in terms of an actual serious repair, there is none that you can do to a Mju 2 to fix the light leaks. Those front of lens light leaks are also unfortunately quite common. Another big issue with them is the motors, because they have quite weak motors built into their tiny little body, so it takes a while for the film to rewind, which isn't really a big deal, but the weak motors can lead to spacing issues, which means that as you take a picture, the motor will sort of think that it needs to rewind more than it actually needs to, or less than it actually needs to, and then it'll freak itself out and go backwards and forwards a bit, and then it ends up with huge blank spots on your roll, or with frames overlapping, and it's just not good. The LCD screens are also a pretty big issue. They fade and become somewhat illegible, and I'd say that this is a common problem because it's happened to both of my Mjus. The second one, which is actually in much better condition physically, has a more intense LCD fade for some reason. I'd assume because the LCD hasn't been used in a long time. And the last thing that I'll mention is the fact that it's an all-plastic build, which makes it quite flimsy. And this is apparent in the amount of cameras that you see floating around without battery doors, because the first thing to go when you drop it is the film battery door, which fortunately that didn't just happen, but the film battery door will pop up and all sorts of bits and bobs will pop off. I've got one of these, a Mju Zoom, where the entire clamshell cover is popped off. It's just not very robust, which you wouldn't expect because it's a point-and-shoot camera, but I just felt I needed to point that out because sometimes people get a bit creative in their descriptions of its reliability. With regards to non-physical aspects that I don't like, it doesn't make the picture the second you push the button. And I said as much in the video where I wandered Cape Town in the rain with it. It's just frustrating to be using a camera where it takes the picture a split second after you actuate the shutter in your mind. Like when I'm making a photograph, I want it to take the picture when I push the button, that exact moment, because I time things to be that way. And I'm sure you could get used to using it and taking into account the fact that it's going to take it slightly after you push the button. But for me, it's kind of a deal breaker in terms of making photographs that rely on specific timing. The flash is also on by default every time you turn it on. It resets when you close the clamshell if you turn it off manually, and you need to turn it off manually every single time you use it by pushing the flash button at the back here twice. That is super frustrating because the flash likes to flash even if you're standing outside in the bright midday sun for some reason. So every time you use the camera, you need to push the back button twice to turn the flash off. Not ideal. And the last non-physical thing I'll mention that frustrates me about the Mju 2 is the fact that the lens likes to default to f2.8 whenever possible, even if you're in bright daylight sometimes, which isn't good. I know that a big draw of this camera to people is its low light abilities as a point and shoot, because it can shoot at f2.8, which is quite wide open, but it's not nice to always have a camera trying to force itself to shoot at f2.8. So, we've had the downsides of the camera, but there are actually some plus sides. Not ones that I'll talk about, but I'll have my friend Hypebeast Will describe them to you. It's a super small camera. You can kind of chuck it in any pocket you like and forget about it, which means you'll always have a camera on you, which is great. It's also got a super sharp lens. Well, I say super sharp. It's not like otherworldly sharp, but it is sharp enough to stand out from most of the other point and shoots available in its class range. It also looks super cool. It sort of flows from the right side to the left, and it's just like pure 90s glory, really, with its construction. And the clamshell function is quite nifty, a bit gimmicky, but you know, it protects your lens and effectively resets the flash every time you close it. But I'm hypebeast, Will, so I'm not going to talk about that. And it's also super easy to use. It works perfectly for me, you know. I like taking photos of my friends in all their cool outfits, and I kind of just put it up to my eyes, push the button, and it does the rest for me. There's nothing I need to worry about. The pictures, they come out pretty decent compared to the Kodak disposable I was using before, so... That other Will guy also said that it wasn't good that it tried to default to shooting in f2.8, but you can force it to shoot at higher apertures by shooting a high ISO film. So I like to shoot ISO 3200, P3200 through it. It's kind of all I've shot through it for the last few months, and it makes it have a decently good depth of field. It's also got a few modes, which is, you know, always good to have features going for it. You've got red eye reduction, which will do a pre-flash before actually flashing to reduce red eye. You've got no flash, which is a mode you'll become very familiar with if you own this camera, because it's what you're going to be constantly switching to every time you open and close it. It's got consistent flash, so if you want to force it to always use the flash, which wouldn't make any sense because it always used it anyway. And a night mode, which goes up to 2 seconds on night mode by default and 4 seconds when you've got it on night mode and red eye reduction, which I guess you can use for skateboarding, but makes no sense to me. Overall though, I like the Mju. I shoot it a bunch, not for anything important, but you know, for personal work or a photo series that I might just want to make for myself. And it's very easy to use and easy to use as a camera that you have on you all the time. I feel that it's important to keep in mind though that it was designed as a consumer level point and shoot, and lauding it as anything beyond that because somehow with age it's become much better at being a consumer level point and shoot doesn't make much sense to me. You can buy a much nicer picture making camera for much less than these go for these days. It'll be bigger, it probably won't look as cool, but the results will likely be better and it'll cost you less money. So I suppose the question is, would I buy one or should you buy one? Well, I would definitely not pay what the current going rate for these is on the open market, on eBay or Gumtree or anywhere else that people post things, because they get the prices off eBay anyway when they do so. They go for an obscene amount these days, and the amount they go for is well beyond what this camera is actually worth in terms of its functionality and output. It's fun to use. It's very fun to use. I like using it, but it's not the insert price here worth using. However, these were mass-produced because they were very popular consumer-level cameras. So, in the tens of millions of them were made, and there are surely still at least a million left out there in working condition in the bottom of someone's sock drawer, and they're bound to end up in a charity shop at some point. And if you're lucky and wander around frequently checking out charity shops, you more than likely will at some point find one for next to nothing. I'm constantly seeing pictures of people in their stories locally and internationally post like a £2 Mju find or a 30 Rand Mju find, and it's not out of the realm of reason, because whilst the Mjus are popular in the film photography community, which is a very niche and small community, in the outside world they mean nothing to anyone. There's some old camera that takes 35mm spools and they'll get thrown out willy-nilly. So if you want to pick one up, I'd recommend being patient and wandering around charity shops frequently. My face feels so swollen.
The Mju was in the red block.
Okay, now I need to get up.